Welcome to Real Talk Food Safety with Jill and Tia, and of course, our special guest.
Welcome everyone. We are so excited for you to be here this week and just talking about, we're diving deep into leadership today and really connecting it to business. You know, we talk all the time around we're here to help. If you work within an organization, right? A part of your job is also to support business goals and to help with business growth and expansion and whatever it is your organization has going on. As leaders, right, we're here to support that. And so we're so excited about this conversation today.
We are. Welcome, Gillian. It's great. We are so grateful to have you with us.
I'm delighted to be here, Jill and Tia. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yes. And thank you to our audience for being here today. Please put in the comments, where are you watching from? And how's the weather? You know, we like to talk about the weather. We're talking a little bit that it's getting warmer, which I'm excited about. So let us know where you are watching from.
Yeah. And, also drop in the chat. We have this gift with Gillian here, and, you are, a seasoned professional, and you're masterful at leadership, which you've shown as your different roles and that you've played in the food industry. So, of course, we're here to ask questions as well. Mm-hmm. So if you have these lingering questions or things that bubble up, now is a great time to even drop those in the chat. So as we navigate the show, we can bring those in and talk about them as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And if this is your first time with us on Real Talk Food Safety, then we want to say hello. I'm Tia. Mm-hmm. This is Jill. And we are co-founders of Catalyst. And this topic is near and dear to us because our whole mission is to transform how we lead in food. Mm-hmm. And it's because we want leaders to show up more authentically. We want them to be able to achieve more and help drive business results without feeling burnt out, overworked, taking work home, right? Feeling like they have the world on their shoulders. And we've all been there, right? Where it feels like, I don't know if I even want to show up to work today. That is not a great place to be in as we, lead food safety, as we lead in our technical fields. We want people to show up to work enthusiastic and loving the work that they do and the people that they work with, and love to lead the people. The people in the activities that they're doing. So at Catalyst, that's what we do. We support leaders. We, our special sauce, if you have heard us talk, is about coaching. All of our programs are coaching based because it really helps you dig into intrinsic motivations. And so we're excited for you to be here today. We're excited to talk about leadership development, and we're excited to jump in.
Sure. We are. So as we get started, Gillian, we'd love to have people share their story as their introduction. So do you mind starting off just telling us a little bit and our audience about you and your journey, and more specifically, what brought you into the food industry?
Sure. So if you can't tell by the accent, all right, now that I've opened my mouth, I'm Irish. And I'm from Cork in Southern Ireland, and I went to school there. I'm one of 9 children. I'm the eldest one. So big family. Ireland is a very agricultural country, and but it's also part of Europe. So I always was fascinated with languages at school, and there was the whole possibility maybe with what was called the EEC. I'm really dating myself back then. Before the European Union, it was called the EEC. That I was thinking, maybe languages on that side, but those jobs weren't so forthcoming. And I also was looking at science because I liked science at school. So then the food science piece, I like food nutrition, I like that kind of thing. So I did all my exploration at university and started visiting departments and stuff like that. And dairy science actually resonated with me because it's Ireland, agricultural country, dairy through and through. So suffice it to say, I pursued a dairy and food science degree. And from there, from UCC, was fortunate enough to be recruited on what they called a milk round, all right, as a graduate management trainee.
To go to the milk round.
The milk round, which is good, right? And they brought a few of us over to England. And that was quite a transition because, you know, you're going from your family, your location, everything that you're familiar with over to London. And but what a company. Oh my gosh. There was a super company. I was so fortunate to be hired by them. Graduate management training program, super experience with them. And they were Express Foods, and they were very ahead of their time, honestly. And they were owned by Grand Met Foods Europe, and they owned Pillsbury, they owned Burger King, they owned Haagen-Dazs, they owned Intercontinental Hotels, they owned Old El Paso, you name it.
Wow.
So the opportunities were immense. But what was brilliant for me was in the graduate management training program, and they flew me back to Ireland 3 times. I was so lucky, all right? So they were really, really good. But moving around the country to the different locations, you're learning as you go. And they were progressive, as I said, on HACCP back in the late 80s. We were looking at that in our dairies. First company in the world to put ISO 9000, which is like the precursor to all the GFSI standards and that, into their dairy, their company, and at the location I was at. So I got exposed to all of that. Plus, we were on the receiving end of a lot of retailer audits all the time. Back then, it was the likes of Marks and Spencer's and Sainsbury's and companies like that. And I thought, oh, I'd love to do something like that. It's like, I'm in the factory, we're receiving all these audits. This is super interesting. And so I approached the company and said, are there any opportunities like this? And I got to work with Burger King. And Burger King, as a supplier quality assurance auditor, covering all of Europe, the Scandinavia, the Netherlands, Italy, well, not Italy, sorry, Belgium and the Netherlands, and wherever they needed me to go. So that was the supplier quality assurance piece. I had the quality systems piece. I had HACCP all the way, and it just kind of built from there. And I'll touch on some of the others. I moved to Haagen-Dazs later with the company, heading up a greenfield site in the north of France, heading up QA and sanitation. I'm a manufacturing person originally, and then I went into food service, Burger King, Haagen-Dazs, and then ultimately got to where the customer is at with retail. And more to come on that one. But that's my bit of background for you, okay? That's over a number of years, let's put it that way.
That's awesome.
Yes, what a journey.
From languages, like being interested in languages, to like, okay, maybe I need to look at something different, to finding your way, right? In not just in food, but in food safety.
Well, you know what happened though, the languages piece, when I was working in the UK, and then I had that opportunity to go with Burger King as a supplier quality assurance auditor, working with the franchisees, working with the different countries, depending on what the quality and food safety issues were. I got exposed to all the different cultures. And that was like, I said, oh my gosh, I'd love the opportunity to live in a different culture. And that was when the France opportunity came up, and I grabbed it. You know, and my husband, we moved there, and that was quite a kind of a wake up. It was different, but fun. Yeah. And the team at Haagen-Dazs, they were lovely, lovely team. They all wanted to improve their English. I wanted to improve my French. I had school French, but it was good. And I had headaches for the first 3 months because I'm trying to represent my team in meetings and talking about, you know, micro results and clearing lots and sanitation and whatever in French. All right. But it got easier and easier and easier. So that's how that goes. So it comes around, Tia. And along the way, I discovered I love this.
Yeah.
I have a passion for food safety. I am so clued in on the customer. And that evolved over time, particularly at Wegmans, food markets, but also through engagement with Stop Foodborne Illness and the consumer advocacy groups and organizations like that.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about consumer trust, because like, you know, a lot of people know you from working at Wegmans and the amazing career that you had there, leading food safety and quality, and just this relationship between retailers and consumers that look different, right? And then the work that you do at Stop Foodborne Illness, all of that is around this consumer trust. Obviously, being in food safety and quality, right? Like the consumer is at the heart of what we do. So how has consumer trust led you throughout your career? Just that whole passion around consumer trust.
Sure. Over time in the different companies, and you'll see where I'm going with this, I started to look for three things in the company as I moved on, as I moved along. One was that the employees are proud of who they work for. And the next thing was that the customer is held in the highest esteem. And the third thing is I could make a difference. And oh my God, I found that with Wegmans. Okay, I found that with Haagen-Dazs. All right, a few places along the way. So the customer piece, the high standards for me is a really big deal. And in Wegmans, I was very fortunate with the team that I headed up on food safety and quality assurance, that we were housed in the consumer affairs department for many, many years. So we had the voice of the customer coming back. There was Mary Ellen Burris, she's a legend in the industry, okay, on behalf of the consumer. Hearing firsthand the consumer feedback day in, day out, all right, you're listening intently to what they're saying. It was like, it was an added bonus, to be honest with you. It's like you could be getting compliments, complaints, questions, comments. It didn't matter. It made your process better. And over time, the trust was developed between the customer and the company that they're listening and they're responding and they're doing the right thing. And when you get that trust, it's precious.
Yes.
I'm not saying other companies didn't have that trust, but you're a little one step removed from it if you're a manufacturer. But when you're a retailer, they're in your stores all the time.
Right.
Okay, so that trust is precious. I learned firsthand from Wegmans how valuable relationship building can be as well, whether it be with your suppliers, whether it be with your customers, whether it's with your employees, because those relationships can be super valuable in a time of need. So if you think about a foodborne illness outbreak that's happening, or you think about a product recall that's underway, those relationships in a pinch, in a hurry, can be really valuable to you, right? So that was a great exposure and a great, what would I call it, function that I fully appreciated, that whole consumer affairs, that whole connection. So I took that with me moving on, and but it built upon what I had come to realize myself, moving from country to country and company to company, that the consumer, holding the consumer in the highest esteem, listening to them, paying attention, two-way communication, and never letting up, continuous improvement all the time. You can always be better.
Yes, yes. That's awesome. That just the way that you talk about building that trust, we're talking about it from a consumer standpoint, but you also mentioned like your employees and your suppliers, I like the way you talk about it, that it was intentional, right?
Yeah.
You intentionally built those relationships to build this trust. And a part of that is that active listening, right? Yeah. And understanding, putting yourself in their shoes, which we're all consumers, so how do they feel when they walk into the retailer? And so especially when we think about leadership and trust, right?
Yep.
And building those relationships and building this area of trust so that you can, like you said, if you're in an issue, you can have those conversations, you can work together more easier when you have those relationships and when you have that trust.
Yeah. Gillian, I'm curious, because there's a lot of companies that say we put consumers, right? They are the number one thing. Maybe it's employees, maybe it's consumers, or customers. Somehow there's a term that, is maybe on the wall or part of their values.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, what do you notice when you talk about maybe the experiences you've had that are maybe different? Because I think there are people who are like in this space where they're like, our company says they're number one, consumers, and that trust is so vital, but yet they don't feel it.
Okay, that's a good question. A couple of things. You as you get older, you get wiser. And when you go into a lot of people on the call will probably see this. You go into facilities, you go into to meet with someone, you kind of pick up on things, okay? So with Haagen-Dazs at that greenfield site in the north of France, they were so proud of the employee. Everybody's so proud of it. They were dedicated to perfection. All right, that was what they were about. That was their motto. Wegmans, if you go into their stores, it's every day you get our best. All right. Other companies, Publix say, where shopping is a pleasure. All right. Like a lot of companies, but there's meat on the bones when you can see that the employees are responding to that and the employees are living it. and you can see, you get a good experience, and you get good service, and you get good follow through. So people are working hard on that all the time. And what fits in with all of that is those high standards. All right. If you have high standards on everything. So it's on food safety and quality for sure, but it's everything about the company. Right. And then that lends itself to performance across the company. It's the culture. It becomes the culture,
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a cool question.
Yeah. And linking those values, right? Like understanding that the employee is bought into the values, right? It's almost one on like, this is the way that we do work, not just in food safety, right? Not just whenever this happens. This is who we are all the time.
Yes. And I love the insight about team members that are proud to work there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that discernment really is powerful, because we've probably all been in facilities where people don't seem excited to be there. Yeah. They're here because it's a job, it's a paycheck. And I think when we have people who ask, like, how do I really tell if they live their values? I think that is so powerful to think, how do people seem? Like, are they proud to work there? Because if you're proud to work there, then you'll be proud to do all those things you talked about to make sure that the consumer stays at the center, that you're doing things to support the business, doing things to support other team members. Yeah. That is really insightful.
Yeah. Sure. The other thing too is the pride is tangible. When people are talking about where they work, and you can tell it that it's with a sense of pride. After a while, you start to figure out, where do you want to work where you enjoy it? Yeah. You actually like going to work. You are making a difference. The customer matters, therefore you matter, because you're a customer too. Right. And then also you can build on that. So in the food safety space, and I know this gets talked about and should, it's like food safety people, and food safety and quality assurance get brought together. I've always been a believer it's all together, right? But they can, you can act on the food safety piece and explain that it's so important that they understand why they're doing what they're doing when it comes to preparing food, or when it comes to manufacturing food, or when packing food, that as if it was your own family that you were preparing it for. So it's the notion of the customer, and this time it's you. Right. You follow me? So it's like it becomes your work matters. All right. You take pride in your work. And you are and therefore would you serve it to your own family? No. Well, no, then you don't do that. Then you don't produce that. All right. So it actually filters down into all facets of the company, of doing the right thing, high standards, and continuous improvement. Science changes, regs change. Best practices change, the customer needs change, and you better stay on top of all of that with continuous improvement and have that mantra. That resonates with me, I guess. Yeah, is, you can kind of tell.
Absolutely, right? Absolutely, same. I'm curious. Someone listening, many of our audience, they're down this path, or they're trying to go down this path of building this trust. Or helping their organization understand why it's important to have this trust with consumers. So I'm curious, if someone's going down the path and they're like, where do I even start to build this trust, even within the organization, so that they will feel the importance of consumer trust within the organization? Where would you say start?
That is a really good question, Tia. What I do today with Kelleher Consultants is help Kelleher says we help companies build sustainable food safety and quality programs with a focus on prevention. And the key word there for me is sustainable, because I've seen it over the years. I've gone back to different companies I've worked with, and it's in place. So this this whole customer trust thing is not an overnighter. It's something that's built over. That's why I said it's precious. It's built over time. Wegmans had it 100 years in the making. All right, okay. Haagen-Dazs' approach was, as they grew, as they went from France, from the US, from New Jersey and West Coast over into Europe and then into Japan and what have you. It was like a conscious effort to be the best. All right. And that resonates with the customer in terms of the customer experience. So it's living it, I would say. It's following through on it, but it's not an overnighter. It's like and it's putting your consumer front and center.
Yeah.
Like, would they listening to them? You said it earlier with the active listening. Okay.
Yeah.
So if you're in your own company, start, who are your customers? Identify. They could be customers that might be just the next step in your supply chain. They might not be the end user. They might not be in the store. That's okay. Just be the best you can be in the role that you're in to satisfy the customer that you're working with. And if the customer is, ultimately, it's going to be the person who purchases the product and takes it home to serve to their family, right? Because we're all talking food here. So there's lots of ways you can do it. And the other ways, get involved with some consumer associations. Stop Foodborne Illness, the consumer advocacy group, terrific. It's terrific at what they do. And they're representing victims of foodborne illness. But I'm proud to be, I was asked to get involved with them a number of years ago, proud to be on their board and proud to be involved with them. But we have an industry arm now, it's called the Alliance. And we work on ways to instill food safety culture. And they came up with a toolkit for industry free of charge to use. Okay, those kind of organizations, oh my God, they put the consumer front and center because we meet those consumer advocates all the time. Yeah. So that's something easy if you wanted to get involved. Honestly, if you're really deliberating on this and saying, hey, we want to pull the consumer into what we're doing.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Starting in these areas. Yeah. And I love the way that you call out that it's not something that you can just put together and it's happening overnight. Right? Like this takes time and effort and intention to get going and to sustain it.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why, Tia and Jill, that's why it's so important that the company remains committed to food safety and food quality, because it's paramount to the livelihood of your employees, of the satisfaction of your customers, the safety of your customers. So those sorts of resources. Sometimes they're hidden, I won't say hidden, not appreciated fully, because nobody knows about when you're doing the good stuff, but they know about when something goes wrong. Yeah. So there's more now with the leadership piece of realizing and recognizing, great effort, diligence, commitment, and actually saying, you know what, it's terrific that we don't have, you will have recalls, of course you will. Stuff happens. But generally speaking, you keep pushing forward, you keep improving, you keep working hard. And sometimes that's not called out as much as it could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you probably do as well in your line of work. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think, you point out a really, an area of opportunity, because I think often when we think of food safety and quality, one of the things that people look at, and perhaps whether it's driven by regulations or customers or GFSI, but the first place people often start are policies. Like, what are the policies and programs? And I love the idea of, like, how do you bring consumers more front and center with that?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Because otherwise the focus seems to shift to kind of the checklist of things that need to be done versus embedding, like you said, that trust and helping people really connect to it. It's about building the culture and making it sustainable.
Jill, you got me thinking about something there. A real easy thing, another thing someone can do besides, reaching out to someone like foodborne illness, is that asking to see your customer complaints. Okay. Yeah. And it doesn't have to be always complaints. It could be questions too. They could be interesting. It could be compliments, and you can let your team know. All right. But it's like, it's that listening piece and that too, and making changes. Yeah. And then the customer might see those as well. So there's lots of things you can do to tighten up or change your focus or your emphasis in your own company. Start with small steps. You can.
One step at a time.
One step at a time. Yes. Yes. And, another point that you brought up, and Jill, even I think you were touching on it a little bit, is around deciding who you want to be as an organization. So stepping outside of that checklist of policies, stepping outside of like, okay, well, what does regulation says? It's really more around, who do we want to be? What is the best we can be? What is our standards? Like, even as you talk about high standards and like even Haagen-Dazs saying like they want to be the best, they are setting those standards for themselves. They're saying this is how we want to show up. And so one of the things, you know, we talk to with some of our clients is that outside of regulation, right? Outside of what GFSI is saying, outside of all of those things, what type of organization do you want to be? And really align those values, right, around who you are. And then things will start to make more sense on what best practices you should implement and where should you spend your time and money and how you should develop your people. All of those pieces starts to make a little bit more sense versus like, well, is the FDA going to say anything about it? Or, you know, is my BRC auditor going to say something about it? Like that's something, that's a different focus than let's be the best we can be and who we want to be.
You're right, Tia. But the other thing is that gradually doing that, you're building your reputation up over time. You're showing up, you're engaging, you're driving change, you're listening, you're making improvements where you can. And something, you see, because I go back so far, I boil stuff down. I'm a builder. I build stuff is what I do. But my messaging, for me, it's all about prevention.
Yes.
The ideal scenario is you prevent the recall, you prevent the customer complaints, you prevent the foodborne illness outbreak, and then what's at the core of that? HACCP with all the associated GMP, GRP, GDP, you name it. The foundations rock solid, the system on top, the training, the focus, etc. So prevention is key. And if you have that in that company culture you're talking about, and you get a reputation for outreach, helping, engaging in industry, relationship building is a huge deal externally too. You don't know everything about everything. You're not going to. But there are subject matter experts out there who do. There are academics out there who do. You partner. Okay, you partner, you bring in, you engage, you learn more, and you make sure not only your own team, but maybe your suppliers as well could benefit. Maybe others could benefit. That GFSI network you talked about is powerful, but there are other powerful networks out there. So yes, Tia, you can build all that, and in so doing, it will strengthen your reputation that you're genuinely committed to this.
Right. You know? Yes. And you brought up prevention a few times, and I want to talk a little bit about that, but how, it seems like it's really closely tied to even this trust, consumer trust, employee trust, right? Trust within the organization. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience around organizations that value prevention and organization who might not be there yet and really focus on reacting?
Sure. The companies that I come across and have come across over the years on the preventive front are what I would call the forward-leaning food safety companies. So they show up, they engage, they have a track record of doing that. Okay, they are maybe perhaps cutting edge, or maybe perhaps they're more traditional, but a great reputation because they're rock solid in what they do and their customers know it. Okay, so when it comes to, but all of those companies are practicing prevention because you can tell, because it's working, right? And if there's gaps, they're trying to plug the gaps. If there's new technology needed or there's something missing, they're trying to drive change there.
Right. Yeah.
That's what I think when it comes to prevention. The other thing right now, the whole modernization piece is massive. Modernization on traceability, modernization on technology. That's huge. And the other thing that's colossal out there for leaders, and leaders benefit from it because they can bring it back to their own companies. Think of GFSI. Think of a whole lot of things. Center for Produce Safety. You can bring back practices. You can bring back ideas. You can bring back learnings to your own company and impart the knowledge.
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
And that helps with the culture. That helps with the reputation. That helps with the prevention piece too.
Yeah. That investment, right? The
Correct. It is an investment. It is an investment, but it could be of your time. It could be your own time. It could be the company's time. But if your food safety and QA function as much as you can as the leader, align it with the company priorities. And when the company priorities happen to be high standards, that is terrific. When it happens to be continuous improvement is a focus, because then it helps. It can be helpful. So you try to align what you're doing with your company's direction, strategy, that kind of thing. Okay. Yeah. But you're right. It is an investment. But oh my God, investing in your people are so critical. Yeah. Oh my God, to food safety, so critical. So it's worth it. It's really, and over time, there's, retiring, there's, turnover, what have you. So it's really important. Like what you guys are doing, what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. We know, right? And that we're on this board because we can't get there, right, without that investment in our people, in our resources, in our organization, right? In order to be forward thinking, in order to prevent thinking about like what's coming down the road, right? What's bubbling up. That takes investment to do it. But we know, like you said, the organizations that are doing it, we see it through their reputation. We see it through that consumer trust. We see it through their employees. Right? The pride that the employees have, but then also how they feel about showing up to work each day, how they interact with their people that they're leading. All of those pieces are like it's the pieces of the recipe, right? That's your end meal. You have to be intentional about each of those pieces if you want your meal to taste good.
Yeah. Right. And it is like a recipe. And it's always changing. The ingredients are always changing.
Yes.
There's core ingredients.
Right, exactly.
Well, and it kind of reminds me, when I think about even like you said, being forward leaning or moving into this prevention space and the investment. I think about how many times we work with people and they're like, well, my company always says food safety is really important. Like we're not going to cut corners there, but yet they come to us because they're like, we feel like we're cutting corners. We feel like this part isn't working. And I'm curious, when it comes especially to prevention, like what advice would you give someone when they're like, I feel like my company is like, I can never get the budget. I can never get commitment for the investment. What advice would you give someone to be able to help them move past that?
It's so funny. I was going to ask you guys if I could make a little plug at the end for the Food Safety Summit, all right? But I'll make it now. So I've been honored to be asked to be the chairperson of the Educational Advisory Board for the past couple of years. So back in 2023, we put a leadership session on the program. And it was led by Eric Moorman and who else was in there? Lauren Dunn-Nelson. There were several people in that particular session, and it was great. And they gave some tools to take away. On the back of that, we did another session last year, and that was developing food safety leader skills, and tools you could take away. Culminating in this year, we have the opening session of the Food Safety Summit, which will be from the 6th to the 9th of May. In Rosemont, Illinois, has this very topic, how to have difficult conversations, Jill, all right, is one part of it, and how to communicate science to a non-technical audience.
Important,
right?
Yes.
And the reason why these are coming up is because they're Educational Advisory Board members bringing these very examples up. That it's not easy to ask for money, all right? It's not easy to explain, allergen control in the facility, why we can't do something this way or why we have to change. Science, sometimes, you have to explain things in layman's terms sometimes because these are business people covering a myriad of things. So how do you communicate? So those topics through interactive workshops are going to be part of that session. It's a who's who in the panel. You'll all know Jorge Hernandez. Deb Kane, Spear Marinakis from Maple Leaf, Cindy Yang from formerly McDonald's, she's retired now, John Crable from Chipotle. There's a whole group there, and we have a lady from Science Fridays from National Public Radio, and she'll be helping with the communication non-science topic, or science to non-technical audience. So there's my plug. But those kind of things, they need work, Jill. We need to help people. have difficult conversations and know how to prepare beforehand.
Yeah.
For sure. We highly recommend, if you're listening and you're like, that sounds like it's for me, go.
Yes.
That's a lot of work that we do with clients. Like, how do we step into those spaces? How do we prepare? How do we do the follow-up? How do we understand why are we afraid to step into that conversation?
Yep.
Yeah.
What is it that we think is going to happen? And it always seems so easy. Like, we'll just do it. But there's so many other factors that come along, whether, like you said, some of the translation of some of the science, so it's more understandable, whether it's connecting it more closely, right, to business strategies.
Yeah.
But even, once again, a lot of it comes back to soft skills.
Yeah.
And the human skills of connecting and sharing stories and connecting, like you said, to, are we proud of who we are?
Yeah.
And what does that look like? And how do we stand in that space where we ask with curiosity versus conflict?
Yes. Yeah. We love this tie of leadership within these conversations because, like Jill said, like, these are skills. These are skills that people that we need. We really honestly need everyone that's in technical fields like food safety, especially in food, to have these skills and to gain these skills and to practice and to get better over time and be able to relate, as they move to different organizations or as they move in groups, because that's really how we're going to strengthen food safety culture, right? Culture in general. It's really about the people. And as we talk about these different pieces of like active listening and connecting with people and all of these communicating, connecting values, right, to the company values, all of those pieces, that takes skill to do. And some people it comes naturally to, right, to a point, and some people it doesn't, right, and they have to develop it in a different way. But in each of those situations, it is a skill. And I think sometimes it's one of the reasons why we created Catalyst, is because we saw in our careers and we see in others around us that organizations don't prioritize, or even sometimes don't know how to prioritize getting the soft skills to technical resources that have to do a lot more influencing than, I'm going to write you up if you don't do it, right? Or there's going to be corrective action if you don't do it. A lot of times we're not the person that gives the corrective action if you're not following through, right? If you don't put consumers first, we might not be the person to say, hey, you're not living with our values. Let's have a conversation about it. We're typically the person that's trying to influence. And that alone is a different skill. It takes practice and time to master. And even when you feel like you've mastered it, right? There's been movement in the organization and now you have a new boss. Right. And now you have to figure out, how do I influence, right? How do I step up and lead in a different way, now having a different person or a different key stakeholder. So, we love these conversations. We're looking forward to the conversations at Food Safety Summit and into the future because, we've made our whole mission around it because we know that it's needed.
That's brilliant that you guys have identified. Clearly, it is needed, clearly. And even in the context now of the Food Safety Summit, the notion is to provide practical solutions after the workshop is over for people to take away tools that they can use. All right, that they can practice in their own house, in their own companies, okay, and with their own teams. I do need to put a special mention here of Dr. Hal King's ebook on leadership for food safety for business, food safety leaders for business, and that whole ebook that he wrote that's available out there. The emphasis is big time on food service, but there's some excellent Jorge Hernandez from, for example, from the Wendy's companies in there, Kerry Bridges from Chipotle, and it's to my knowledge, it's still a free ebook that's available.
I think it is,
It's great. It has many stories and takeaways, and I think that really can help inspire people to think like it can be more, it can be better, it can be different.
And you know what what the three of us were talking about earlier there, Mitzi Baum, who's the CEO of Stop Foodborne Illness, has a chapter in there, and Stephen Mandernack from AFTO has a section in there also, because it brings the whole thing. It's not just food safety leaders, you're part of a kind of a milieu of all regulatory, academia, like the GFSI world. It's manufacturing, retail, food service, supply chain, all of the above. It's everybody. And then there's those different experts in the different areas, and then you lean on them and pull them in too when you need to. You know?
Yeah, it's a big ecosystem.
Exactly. That's
and
the
just
word.
recognizing that it is all around, and there are so many avenues to get the support you need.
Yeah.
Because even when you walk away and you have those tools, you know, I love when people go back, and sometimes we hear them go, I was able to do this one, but then I just kind of fell back into my normal routine.
Which happened.
And I forgot to do them. And that's part of why you probably heard us talk about. That's why we really lean into the coaching aspect of helping people with the continued practice. Why isn't it, you know, like explore, why did it fall off? Why wasn't it a priority? Like, what were the messages you had? What was the resistance you felt? Really helping people get to that next layer to understand why it wasn't something they could translate over to a practice if they really intended to do that.
Yeah.
And help them make that transition easier. So
I
think it's amazing all the support from these different angles that are available for people.
Yeah.
I love it.
Jill, you got me thinking there a while back, and it was something that was very commendable on Wegman's part to change over store audits and store auditors to coaching. To coaching and educating and you know, troubleshooting and helping versus the police, you know, coming in, because it's so important. The why you're doing what you're doing, and knowing, you know, and what's involved, and not being afraid to be able to ask a question, and also the whole continuous improvement piece. Then with that sort of scenario, say at store level or in a plant, in a manufacturing plant, designing it and setting it up for success. So with the latest, not having employees having, you know, a hard time every day because you haven't laid out something, or you haven't designed something, or you haven't made it straightforward for them to work with. They're your assets, those employees. They are close to what's going on. So coaching them and advising, hand-holding, being available, being accessible is a big deal. Is a big deal. So kudos, Wegmans did that a long time ago, because they were asked with the store operations, can you help us?
Yeah.
Right.
Active listening.
Yes, and just that, you know, it's I think about leadership and what an honor it is to be able to be committed to other people's success. And you know, I don't think it's always been presented that way, where it was more like, well, if I climb up the ladder, I have success. Well, no. We're supposed to have our success is really helping others. And I think sometimes it gets lost in all the things. And so I love that. Like, just a slight shift in how we approach something and bringing a new perspective. Like, instead of auditing, we're coaching. Instead of policing, we're supporting. Just reframing and positioning makes a huge difference in how people feel about that relationship.
Yes. And it's important to, you know, it was one of the reasons why we lean on coaching, is that continuous touch point, right? Of just like what Jill's talking about, like if something didn't work, understanding why it didn't work, and if you were going to try it again, how would you do it differently? And thinking through these scenarios, you know, when we think about and talk about continuous improvement, that's really what we've kind of learned also from continuous improvement, right? On like, we're revisiting and looking at, and one thing with coaching is that it's so person focused, right? That you're really doing that continuous improvement within yourself to take a look at and say, okay, where am I today? Where do I want to be tomorrow? And let me start thinking through how do I get there? And we should be doing that within ourselves, you know, as people, as leaders, and we should be helping our organizations do that through continuous improvement.
And be open too. I agree with you, Tia, totally. Be open as well to new ideas you might get somewhere else.
Oh, yes.
And what's the harm in trying them?
Right.
Bring in something that I remember hearing about years ago, the huddles in manufacturing, just for like 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever you need to do, whatever people appreciate, and it gets the message across, go for it. Be willing to try stuff.
Yes, I'm a fan of do trials. Do it for a week. See what you think.
There you go.
Right. You don't have to do it forever. It's not a life sentence, but try it something new.
Exactly.
And
And if it works today, if it doesn't work in 10 years, hey, let's try something new.
Yes.
Right? Like you're not signing up for forever.
No. And lots of different companies go about what they do serving their customers in very different ways. And that's refreshing.
Yes.
And sometimes you get ideas outside of the industry. They might not be in the food industry at all.
Oh, yes.
And that's, you can learn from others as well. So just you mentioned it earlier, Jill, curious, have an open mind, listening, watching, paying attention to what's out there, and then bring it back for your own company. So you can do a lot, Tia. You can do a lot. Remember, you were asking, what can you bring back?
And I think that even plays into, one of the things that we wanted to talk about on the show, because you had highlighted, relationship building is so important.
Yeah.
And I think, even as you talk about that, it reminds me that so often we're like in our own little microcosm.
Yeah.
And we forget sometimes, like, externally. That there are other resources and relationships that we can build to, once again, just make life easier and share and cross-pollinate. What's been your experience as you've gone through your career or as you've seen others when it comes to relationship building? And I think the question a lot of people always have is like, how do I do it?
Oh gosh, it's easy. No, it's not easy. It takes work, but it's not hard. It's not, unless you're super shy or something like. And I'm more of an extrovert now than when I was starting out. But let me tell you an interesting story. Do you remember when I took you back when I first started and I moved with the milk round to England? So that company was a very progressive company, and they were genuinely ahead of their time. And I'm still in touch with about 8 to 10 people from that company. Okay. Sarah Mortimer from Walmart is one. Amanda Craddock she's with the BRC Global Solutions is one. There are a number of us out there. And Sue Rose is another in the UK. There's a number of us out there. And you build like a relationship over time. The relationship could be distant, or it could be call them up anytime kind of thing. And then, so you build your own internal network in the company that you're in. And you probably choose to stay in touch with some and not others, depending, and that's absolutely fine. And but the internal thing, and you also want to go up and across and build relationship with everybody, all right? And come with, so the mutual respect, that you care about them, that and you're listening to them, you're paying attention, and vice versa, okay? So internal relationships, huge, all right, for your credibility, for your leadership, for your follow through, all of that. External relationships, powerful. If you can bring them back to help your own company, powerful. All right. And there's some real good examples in the trade associations of those. Whereas if you do the work, you roll up your sleeves, you engage in a committee, in a different trade association, and you bring back that knowledge, and it drives change in your own company for the good. All right, the science, the best practice, etc. Are you engage in studies because they just make sense? You partner with a local university, you work with it. So those external relationships are powerful for your company. And oh, by the way, they're really good for you as well. Because they're broadening your skill set, they're broadening your outlook. But you do have to be willing to. I think you were saying it's a hard. It's not hard. You can do that on a very vigorous scale, or you can do that on a slow and steady scale, and that's fine too.
Yeah. When we talk about building relationships is a key part of our technical leader boot camp, which is the first tier of our leadership development program. And what we tell people as they're developing these skills is to start, right? Start using these skills and thinking about what worked, what did not work. Do I feel closer to this person? Do I feel like I'm moving? We use a trust model. Do I feel like we're moving on the trust model? Do I need them to move on the trust model? All of those pieces to explore. And when you're not intentional about building these relationships, you can wake up 5 years down the road and think, wow, I haven't built these relationships internally, right? I haven't built them externally. So when you go through something, right, and you need to lean on relationships, you don't have those strong bonds there. Versus if you had been building those relationships over time, when there are no issues, right? Then you could start to lean on those relationships, and they can lean on you, right? If something happens and you need to use that relationship. And it doesn't have to be something like, oh, we're going through a recall, right? Or we have a foodborne illness. Like that's like, at the very top. It could be something like, what am I going to do next with my career? Or my organization wants me to go cross-functionally into operations. Who do I know to have a conversation? It could be something like that, where you need to lean on your network, and you need to lean on your trusted network to have conversations. So we talk a lot about building those skills so that you can build relationships.
That's great. Yeah. That's wise. That's wise that you do that for people, because the it's just an extra bit of boost of confidence to know that in your corner or in the wings, you've got these tried and true contacts that you can reach out to, you know, and there's a lot of mentoring that goes on out there too for people. And also I noticed that with, you're in a better place when you're going for your next job. All right. When you're going for your next position, and you are a connected individual because you work hard at it. It might be through, you know, a professional organization or a trade association, but you're savvy to the industry. You know, some of like who's who, or you go to a summit once a year, or you go to a conference or something. And, you know, IAFP is terrific. Those PDGs they have, the professional development groups, that's great. They're great, right? That sort of thing. It's almost like another, you know, feather in your cap when you go into an interview, because you're clued in, not just the company you're going to, it might be a different sector, but you're clued into, you know, what they're interested in, their products, their issues, you know, their consumers, all of that. I always remember years ago, NAMI, it used to be called the American Meat Institute, and it became North American Meat Institute. But they came up with some Listeria 101, Listeria Control 101, John Balls, all those guys. You'll remember hearing about all that. But like that's powerful for a trade association to offer those sort of courses. And then if you're, let's say you're a candidate and you're going into an interview or something, and you have all this experience because you've had these opportunities, that adds to you, that rounds out what you're offering to that, what would I call it? Employer, I think.
It does, because it's another level of support that you can offer an organization.
Right.
And it's that looking outside to understand, like, where can we find different answers or be curious or different to bring in.
Yeah.
And being an introvert, you know, I spent probably the first half of my career thinking, oh, I can't reach out to that person, or why would they want to talk to me? Or, oh my gosh, too nervous. And this is where when you talk about getting older, I'm so glad as I got older, I got wiser. Like, reach out. You know, it's really,
you're right, Jill. Yeah.
You know, and it just takes that first time. And
Jill, what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen, right?
Right.
Yes.
They ignore you, or they don't pick up your call or whatever. Who cares, right?
Right, exactly.
And, you know what? And that might happen because we know we're all super busy. But you know, don't give up the first time. Be like, hey, I've got a question, or would you have 15 minutes? Whatever it is. Most people that I've run across have always been like, I do. Maybe not today because I'm in the middle of the fire, but later this week or next week. And so I think if there's someone on your list that you're like, I'd love to meet them, just reach out to them, or ask someone that you know you're connected to make an introduction.
Right.
That's right. And meet them on their terms. If they say to you, I got 15 minutes next week, grab it.
Grab it. Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's valuable. It's valuable. You know, I think we're touching on a little bit too, that your network can be valuable to you, valuable to your organization. And so spending that time to build it is important. And I feel like that's one thing that I did not even think about early on in my career, especially. And I think this is almost like a thing, like being in a large organization that has a ton of resources and like people resources, right? Like, I know a few people that work within the organization, but I didn't think outside of the organization on building those resources until I was in a role where I needed external resources to help move our culture forward, our food safety culture forward. And then it's like, oh man, I should have been building these relationships, you know, the first half of this career. But it's something that I always tell people starting out, start building your network, even if it's a little at a time, right? It doesn't have to be full on, that's what I'm doing, right? How do you connect with one person a month? Start there.
That's it, right, exactly right. And get yourself out of your comfort zone. If it's not, just try one. Try one, try two, and keep those going. But you got to work your network. You can't, once you have them, you got to touch base, even if it's an email or even if it's a quick call or you meet them at an event. You got to kind of keep an eye on it too, right?
Yes, absolutely. You have to nurture it, just like you have to nurture your skills, just like you have to nurture this trust, right? That we've been talking about. You have to keep that going.
Yeah. We do. All right, we have covered a lot, from like consumer trust to prevention to like high standards and relationships and lots of things in between.
Yep.
Wow, there are a lot of insights and takeaway for our audience today.
Yeah. And we're curious, what would you say are the one or two things you want our audience to walk away with today?
Consumer focus. That's the first one. Absolutely. That's why we're in the food industry, to produce safe food, quality food for consumers so they're satisfied. So that's the first one. And let's see, we have I would say, for the audience that we have here, the relationship piece, because it's all down to people. It's all down to people in the plant setting, in a warehouse, in a restaurant, in a retail store, all along the supply chain. So relationship building, internal and external.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yes, that's great advice. And if you are looking to even immerse more into leadership and connecting with people and networking to build those relationships, like you said, Food Safety Summit is just around the corner.
Ooh,
and they've got a dynamite, right? They have a dynamite agenda. Gillian is like leading the agenda. So
yes. And we'll be there. We'll be there hanging out in a couple of weeks. So connect with us. We're happy to talk, because this is exactly the space that we're in. How do we build stronger leaders, right? That can help lead our organizations forward. So we're excited about seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Likewise, look forward to seeing both of you there, and any of the other listeners on the call today. And thank you so much for having me today, and continued success in what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you for being on the show today.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Well, we will be back here next week, same time, same place, with another episode of Real Talk Food Safety. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Gillian. And to everyone out there, make it a great week.
Yes. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.